Welcome back, everyone. Another week, another wave of economic insanity. If you thought the trade war was behind us, think again. This isn't the end. It's barely the beginning. What we're witnessing now is only the first inning of what could be a long and painful global conflict, and already the scoreboard isn't looking good for Trump, Lutnick, or the self-proclaimed economic geniuses nestled within the walls of the White House. This is a story of trade, tech, and turmoil, where geopolitical ambition clashes with economic reality, and the people who end up paying the price are the everyday Americans, especially the farmers. Within just 7 days, the White House caved, twice. First came a 90-day tariff pause, then a sudden exemption on electronics and smartphones. Why? Because they had a sobering moment of clarity. A flash of realization: if they press the gas pedal too hard, the very pillars of American industry, companies like Apple, could come crashing down. Let's break it down. Apple's global empire is built on one product, the iPhone, and over 90% of those iPhones are manufactured in China. You remove that supply chain, expect sales to nosedive, expect revenue to evaporate, Apple would be gutted overnight. Now, could Apple move production elsewhere? Technically, yes, but doing so risks retaliation from Beijing, and Apple knows it. About 17% of its revenue comes from China. That's a slice of the pie too big to lose. In short, the White House blinked. Twice. They realized too late that the United States isn't holding the cards it thinks it is. Just when you think rational thinking might return to the corridors of Washington, enter Howard Lutnick, back in the spotlight and ready to unleash a fresh round of tariffs. But this time, it's not just smartphones, it's semiconductors, it's pharmaceuticals. The name of the new game: strategic dominance through industrial reshoring. Lutnick's message is simple. America must stop relying on foreign powers, especially China, for essential products like chips and medicine. The new tariff regime will target those sectors to companies to bring production back home. On paper, that might sound like patriotic economic policy. But let's be honest, the devil is in the details, and the reality on the ground is far more complicated. Under the previous administration, Biden chose a different weapon: subsidies. Rather than wielding tariffs like a hammer, he dangled massive carrots. Take the CHIPS Act, a $53 billion package designed to lure semiconductor manufacturers back to American soil. TSMC, Taiwan's chip titan, was enticed with grants, loans, and a 25% tax credit. Samsung, another $14 billion in incentives. This was an arms race in subsidies. Biden was fighting with a war chest, not a tariff stick, and it was working, to a degree. Big names were opening factories in Arizona, Texas, and elsewhere. America was finally trying to reclaim its position in the global semiconductor hierarchy, but now, Trump wants to dismantle that entire strategy. He believes tariffs, not subsidies, are the key to winning this war. And to prove his point, he's threatening TSMC with a 100% import tax. Sure, TSMC has committed to a $50 billion plant in the U.S., but is that really a win? Or just a costly illusion? Because here's what's actually happening. American chip makers are getting slaughtered. Let's take Intel as an example. When Trump's tariff war reignited, Intel's share price plummeted almost 4% in hours. Why? Because nearly 27% of Intel's revenue comes from China. And Beijing's response was swift and brutal: a 125% retaliatory tariff on all U.S. goods, including chips. That instantly priced American semiconductors out of the Chinese market, the world's largest chip consumer. And just to twist the knife further, China closed every loophole. It doesn't matter where the chip is routed. If it's made in the U.S., it's punished. Period. So now, any company thinking about reshoring to America automatically loses access to the Chinese market. The incentive to stay in the U.S.? Gone. Replaced with financial suicide. Let's be clear. Beijing is playing chess, while Washington is smashing the board with a sledgehammer. But China wasn't finished, not even close. Before Trump even returned to office, Beijing had already begun a resource war, cutting off U.S. access to critical minerals like gallium, germanium, and antimony. These aren't obscure elements. They're the foundation of the entire semiconductor industry. And this month, China tightened the screws further, banning exports of 7 more rare earth elements. Now yes, America can find other suppliers, but with global supply constrained, prices will skyrocket. And other countries, they'll charge America an arm and a leg, because they. Meanwhile, China controls 70% of global rare earth production and 100% of the heavy rare earth refining. Think about that. The U.S. might find the raw material elsewhere, but it needs China to process it. And here's the kicker. China could easily ban any foreign supplier from using its refining facilities if their cargo is headed to the U.S. It's economic warfare, and Beijing is holding the high ground. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the people who are often overlooked in these conversations. American farmers. They are the backbone of any functioning society. Without food, nothing else matters. No chips, no tech, no economy, nothing. But farmers are under siege. Trump's new tariffs, these reciprocal trade barriers, have turned agricultural inputs into luxuries. Fertilizers, tractors, machinery, all more expensive now. At the same time, America's traditional trading partners are retaliating, and the bullseye is directly over the U.S. heartland. Farmers and ranchers are being economically strangled again. We've seen this movie before. In the last trade war, America lost key export markets that had taken decades to build. Buyers turned to South America, and they're not coming back. And this time, the stakes are even higher. Here's what most people don't realize. For the first time in modern history, America is running a massive food import deficit, nearly $50 billion projected by 2025. The U.S. is now importing more food than it exports. Think about that. Why? Because the cost of farming in the U.S. has gone through the roof, especially post-COVID. Meanwhile, countries like Brazil have ramped up production dramatically. China sees this, and they're making moves. They've just locked in a massive soybean purchase from Brazil, over 2.4 million tons in a single week. That's nearly a month's worth of demand in one shot. They're not just buying food, they're stockpiling it. China isn't playing around. Since the original trade war began in 2018, they've cut U.S. soybean imports by over 70% and doubled down on Brazil. It's now their top supplier. If this trend continues, Chinese imports from the U.S. could hit zero and stay there indefinitely. That's catastrophic. So what happens next? With fewer buyers abroad, more American crops will go unsold, farms will close, the supply of food will shrink, and that means prices at home, for everyone, will rise. To make things worse, Trump's 10% universal import tariff applies to food too. So if Americans have to rely on foreign food, they'll pay a premium for it. Groceries get more expensive, budgets get tighter, and middle-class households, already stretched thin, will start to feel the burn. Meanwhile, Chinese demand for food is only going up. Their middle class is growing, their appetite for meat, poultry, cotton, and soybeans is exploding. And the United States? It's becoming irrelevant in those markets. Let's talk numbers. 49% of U.S. soybean exports went to China. That's $13 billion now in jeopardy. 13% of meat and poultry exports, another $3 billion, at risk. 30% of U.S. cotton exports could vanish overnight. And here's the cruel irony. Farmers have already planted and harvested based on last year's estimates. Those goods are coming to market, with no buyers. So where does this all lead? Reshoring sounds noble in theory, but in practice it's becoming a black hole for capital. The chip war isn't isolating China, it's isolating America. Farmers are being sacrificed, manufacturers are walking into closed markets, and the costs are climbing, for everyone. Unless the U.S. dramatically reverses course, the biggest casualties won't be in boardrooms or Silicon Valley. They'll be in the heartland, in fields, on farms, and at family dinner tables. So here's the question for you. Will Lutnick's plan work? Can America out-tariff a global supply chain war? Or are we just watching another chapter of economic self-destruction? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned as we continue to track this unfolding economic battle. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.